99% of all animals to ever live on Earth are already gone, and these 5 species of animals will be extinct before our lifetime is over. Most of us have a fascination with animals. I think that's healthy. It's a notion of a healthy human to be fascinated with wildlife. The unfortunate part is, especially if you've been alive for several decades, we've all seen several species become extinct. And right now it's argued that we're in an extinction event, meaning there are so many species of animals going extinct, it is not usual. It is a hyper flow of extinction. Let's start with a Cat Ba Langur, sometimes called langurs, langurs. Either way, it's a species of primate and probably the one closest to extinction on Earth. This species comes from an island chain, otherwise known as an archipelago, which is belonging to Vietnam. The white-headed langur, or Cat Ba Langur, is on the list of the 25 most endangered animals in the world. This animal, for sure, is the most rare species of primate in all of Asia. According to the Cat Ba Langur Conservation Project, in the 1960s, there was about 2,500, maybe 2,700 of these animals still on the island, and locals said that they saw them all over the place. Sure, it wasn't a huge number, but they moved around and people knew they were there. But as of recently, nobody's saying they see them everywhere. In fact, if you see one, it's the highlight of your day, your week, maybe even your year. And unfortunately for some, maybe they'll only see one once in their lifetime, even though they live in their native range. These numbers continue to decline, not only because their native habitat was being wiped out, but they would also be poached as well. And as of right now, it is estimated that there are between 65 or 67 individuals. This is a very specific number. And once a species gets down to a very low level, depending on the species, what that number is, they'll be functionally extinct, which means there's no way naturally for these animals to proliferate and become a better or bigger population. This species isn't functionally extinct yet, but it's getting really close. And the less animals you have, the more difficult it is to have a healthy population going forward, because the smaller the number, the more likely inbreeding is. And the more likely of inbreeding means the least healthy population moving forward. The 4th entry on our list, lemurs. We could get specific with specific species of lemur because there are a bunch, but these are a Madagascar primate species. We all know Zabumafu, which is a lemur, or ring-tailed lemurs, which again are very popular, but there are lesser known species as well. I had the opportunity to travel to Madagascar last year, and what I saw shocked me. You overlook on these mountainous roads just nothingness. Rice fields everywhere, or just really nothing. Fields of grass and rocks. And you think to yourself, wow, that's very strange. How come there's not a forest there? Well, there used to be. Madagascar used to be covered almost entirely of forest, and almost all of it is completely gone. Because Madagascar is the 4th poorest country in the world. There is no natural gas there, so in order to cook things or heat things, you need to burn wood. Where do you get that wood? From the primary forest. And that's where lemurs live too. The issue with poverty is there isn't very much time or money or resources for conservation of things. Everybody who lives in Madagascar is thinking, how am I going to survive? How am I going to feed my children tomorrow and today? They're not thinking that far in the future about animals that maybe they've never seen because they live in a little city that they've never left. And because of that, there's no real resources, and there are people who are trying conservation of lemurs, but it's not top of mind by the locals. And the problem too is now these animals are being fragmented, their populations. For example, the greater bamboo lemur. There was a forest in a national park I went to and I was going to look for chameleons, and we found this animal, and the tour guide informed us this is the last living animal of her species in that forest. The next closest forest that has this species of lemur is way too far away. Once she dies, that forest will no longer have that lemur species and will never see a greater bamboo lemur ever again. These are big lemurs, but there's also small lemurs, some mouse lemurs that are also on the brink of extinction too. And the main issue here is the deforestation, not so much poaching, although that's a problem too, but there's no slowing down of the deforestation. The reason I went to Madagascar last year and I didn't wait to do it is I knew I'd never have the opportunity again, because if I were to go back in 25 years, there'd be no lemurs left. I truly do believe that if my children wanted to follow in my footsteps, by the time they're old enough to have their own career and get on a plane by themselves, there will be nothing to go see in Madagascar. We're all familiar with Easter Island and why that population eventually ceased to exist. There was nothing left. All the resources were completely gone. And it's sad standing in the middle of Madagascar looking around, and you can see that's exactly what's happening there too. Moving on, number 3 on our list, the Amur leopard. This is one of the most rare species of cat in the entire world. There are very few of them left. And what a striking individual to look at when you look at this image of this leopard. The Amur leopard is one of the most endangered big cats in the entire world. They're native to the temperate forests of Russia and the far east parts of northeast China. This subspecies of leopard definitely looks very different than many others. It has a coat on it that is reminiscent of an animal that would be found in the snow, because they are. But they're smaller than most other leopard species. According to the WWF, there are less than 100 Amur leopards left in the wild and likely around 180 in captivity. In the year 2007, only between 19 and 26 wild leopards were estimated to survive in the southeastern Russia and northeastern China region. It was considered one of the rarest cats on the planet, and still is. The problem is they're threatened by poaching, and the poaching of the prey species that they eat, and habitat loss, deforestation, and forest exploitation. I'd be shocked if there was any left in the wild whatsoever, and this might not take 20 years, it might be less. Coming in at number 2, rhinoceros. Rhinoceros right now have extant species, and there's only 5. There's a bunch of them that are already extinct, and there is one that will be extinct 100% in our lifetime without any question. No way of saving it unless we learn how to clone this animal, because the Northern White Rhino has 2 individuals left in the entire world, and they're both females. And being that they're not a parthenogenic species, there's no way that they can reproduce. Let's go one by one and talk about these species. There are black rhinos, which are in Africa, and there are a few left, but we're talking a few thousand of these animals. And there are great protection efforts for these rhinoceros, but at the end of the day, not only is there habitat loss, but poaching is a big issue for rhinoceros. Not only in Africa, but in Asia too. You see, there's 2 species in Africa, and there are 3 in Asia. All of them have the same thing in common. They have horns on their face, and these horns are made of ivory, and ivory is very valuable to certain cultures. Now, the ivory trade, for the most part, is completely illegal, and in some places has death penalties if you're caught importing or exporting, which is really smuggling ivory. What happens a lot of the times is poachers will either kill the animal and then take its horn or its tusk, depending on the terminology you want to use. Let's call it a horn for today. Or sometimes, even more horrifically, they'll dart it and then they'll cut off most of its face and then just leave it there to bleed out and die. This is especially sad, but what we're doing to combat this is there are protection agencies that will dart a rhino, put it to sleep for a little while, and while it's tranquilized, they'll cut the horn off themselves, and that way there is no motivation for poachers to go after that individual of that rhino. To put this in perspective, the black rhinoceros population was decimated by poaching in the 20th century, with numbers dropping by 98% between 1960 and 1995. 2 of the species in Asia likely aren't coming back from the brink of extinction. The Javan rhinoceros, there are 80 individuals or maybe less. They're all located in one national park in Indonesia. And what's killing them is not only poaching, but disease and volcanoes. See, Indonesia is tons and tons of volcanoes, basically, because that's what makes up those island chains. And with disease, when you have a small population, it is more likely to run through that species and basically decimate them. The Sumatran species, again, has less than 80 individuals, depending on the count. All of them are less than 80, some into the 40s. And the same sort of idea. This is a smaller species, and it looks a bit different because it has this brownish coat of hair, which is unusual for rhinoceros. And it's just a testament to, although they're very close to Javan rhinos, they look completely different. Another issue with rhinoceros is there's political unrest in a lot of places, especially Africa, which makes it very difficult for people who want to save the rhinos to go in there. It's dangerous for them to even be in those regions where there's conflict. And number 1 on our list, one you didn't see coming for sure. The red wolf is one of the most endangered canid species in the entire world. It's native to southeastern United States, and I bet you if you live in the States, you probably didn't even know this species exists. The red wolf since 1996 has been listed as critically endangered. It inhabits most of the Midwest, or used to. This is as far west as Texas and south as Florida, but its territory has been reduced by 99.7%. Today they're found primarily in the northeast region of North Carolina, where the population was reintroduced in the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. They actually like swamps and that type of habitat more than any other. And the interesting part about this entry is the only reason that they have any wild population at all is because they were reintroduced from captive breeding efforts. It is estimated there's about 14, less than 20 for sure, of these red wolves that are left in the wild, and there's between 200 and 300 in captivity. This animal is going to be extinct in our lifetimes. What animal do you think won't be here by the time your lifetime is over, and what can we do to change it? Let me know in the comments section below. As always, please hit like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Helps grow the channel and spread awareness about these animals. And because I do videos every weekend, that means I'll see you in the next one.